People in one community are trying to make sense of a deadly series of events that has two families grieving tonight.
A father is accused of shooting the man who allegedly killed his son. It happened earlier this month on Dink Ashley Road at the corner of Ed Brooks Road.
It was a quiet morning on Dink Ashley Road, but in an instant, everything changed. A car, a loud crash, and then silence. For Chad Woods, that moment wasn't just the end of a peaceful morning. It was the end of his world. What followed was a chain of events no one could have seen coming, leaving behind heartbreak, anger, and questions that may never be answered. This is the story of how one tragic moment turned a father's love into something no one could have imagined. The morning of August 14th, 2023, began like any other in the quiet, rural stretch of Dink Ashley Road in Timberlake, North Carolina. The air was heavy with the summer's humidity, and the road's silence was punctuated by the occasional rustle of leaves in the warm breeze. For Chad Woods, a 41-year-old father, his 17-year-old son Chad Edward Woods II, also known as Junior, and the boy's mother, the day started with a frustrating inconvenience. Their vehicle had run out of gas. What should have been a minor setback spiraled into a chain of events that would leave the small community in shock and sadness. Chad Woods was a man who had weathered his share of storms. Growing up in Timberlake, he was no stranger to the struggles of life in a small rural town. Jobs were scarce, and opportunities even scarcer, but Chad had always been resourceful. He worked various jobs over the years, from construction to maintenance, and he was always determined to provide for his family. Chad was the proud father of 4 sons, Charles, Carter, Caleb, and the now late Chad, Edward Woods II. While Chad's life had been far from perfect, those who knew him described him as a man who deeply loved his boys and took immense pride in being a father.
You couldn't help but to love him, you know. He always wanted to do big things with his life.
Chad Edward Woods II, a bright and ambitious teenager, was the center of his world. Also known as JR, he dreamed of attending college and making a better life for himself. He was known in the community for his quick wit, infectious smile, and kindness. He excelled academically and was a standout athlete at school, often seen practicing on the local fields with his friends. Teachers admired his dedication, and his peers looked up to him, recognizing him as a leader in the making. The bond between Chad and his son was unbreakable. Despite their challenges, including financial hardships and Chad's prior brushes with the law, the two shared a relationship built on mutual respect and love. They spent countless hours fishing in the nearby creeks, working on cars in their driveway, and watching sports together on TV. Chad often spoke about his hopes for his son, vowing to do whatever it took to ensure the boy's dreams became a reality. But life had not been kind to Chad in recent years. He struggled to make ends meet after losing a steady job during an economic downturn. The pressure mounted, and with it came the weight of disappointment and frustration. Yet through it all, his son remained his guiding light, a reminder of what mattered most. Chad's love for his son was evident to anyone who knew them, making the events of that fateful morning all the more heartbreaking. On the morning of August 14th, the trio had set out together to run errands. When their car ran out of gas, it was just another reminder of the small inconveniences plaguing their lives. But for Chad, these moments were manageable, as long as he was with his son. They were a team, facing life's hurdles together. As the trio trudged along the roadside, their laughter and conversation masked their mild irritation. Chad Woods, a man known for his strong bond with his son, was responsible for protecting his family through thick and thin. His son, bright and full of promise, had dreams of attending college and making something of himself. Walking back home was inconvenient, but it didn't seem to pose a problem in the grand scheme of things.
So probably about 2 minutes after that, I heard 2 gunshots, like back to back, just pow-pow. and then it got really quiet.
Around 6:30 a.m., a vehicle approached from behind as the family made their way along the narrow two-lane road. Jeffrey McKay, a 39-year-old electrical supervisor with the North Carolina Department of Adult Correction, was on his way to work in a department vehicle. The road, bordered by thick woods, had limited visibility. What happened next was a moment of horror that no one could have predicted. Jeffrey McKay, known for his diligence and dedication, was a father to a beautiful 2-year-old daughter at the time. Balancing the demands of his job with a deep commitment to his family, McKay was the kind of person who could fix just about anything, a skill that made him invaluable at work and home. His colleagues often described him as reliable and approachable, someone who never hesitated to lend a helping hand. Outside of work, McKay cherished simple pleasures. He was a family man, spending weekends fishing with his wife and child or tending to his small garden. Those who knew him spoke of his easy smile and steady demeanor. Despite the challenges of his job, which often required long hours and high stress, McKay remained a pillar of support for his family and friends. On the morning of August 14th, he was simply heading to work, unaware that his path would intersect with an unimaginable tragedy. McKay's vehicle struck Chad's son, throwing the teenager hard onto the road. The collision echoed sharply through the quiet morning, breaking the stillness and creating a moment of chilling silence. Everything seemed to pause, the rustling of leaves, the hum of distant insects, even the passing of time. And then, all at once, reality rushed back in. McKay's heart raced as he slammed on the brakes, his tires screeching to a halt. Adrenaline surged through him as he stumbled out of the vehicle, his hands shaking uncontrollably. The horror of what he'd done hit him all at once. He searched for his phone, his fingers struggling to find the right buttons as he dialed 911, his voice breaking as he spoke to the dispatcher. "I've hit someone," he said, his breath coming in shallow gasps. His words were barely audible over the pounding of his own heart. Dropping the phone to his side, McKay hurried to the boy's motionless body. Kneeling down, he felt the rising panic clawing at his chest. The teenager's face was still, his eyes closed as though in sleep, but there was no mistaking the truth. McKay reached out hesitantly, his hands hovering above the boy's shoulder before recoiling. It was too late. The lifeless body before him carried the weight of a future that would now never be realized. Further down the road, Chad Woods and the boy's mother stared at the scene in stunned disbelievement. Then, as though awakened from a nightmare, Chad's legs gave way beneath him. The boy's mother, clutching her chest as though to keep her heart from breaking entirely, stumbled toward her son, but her steps faltered. She collapsed into sobs, her cries mingling with the anguished wail of her partner. McKay remained frozen, still gripping the phone, his desperate attempts to offer comfort drowned out by the torrent of grief emanating from the boy's parents. The scale of the tragedy rendered words meaningless. For Chad, the world had shattered in an instant, his son's life extinguished in a moment. His cries became louder and harsher, each one cutting through the still air like a blade. Then, something shifted within him. A lifetime of love, dreams, and promises for his son had been stolen in the blink of an eye. Overwhelmed by loss, Chad was no longer a man thinking rationally. He was a father, overcome by a wave of pain, his emotions raw and unfiltered, and nothing could stop the darkness that descended upon him at that moment. In his anguish, Chad allegedly retrieved a firearm. Where it came from or how it ended up in his hands remains unclear, but what happened next is a tragic testament to the destructive power of grief. Chad fired multiple shots, striking McKay. The electrical supervisor, who had stopped to do the right thing, fell to the ground. The man who had called for help, the man who had not fled the scene, now lay bleeding to death alongside Chad's son. He would later pass away at the hospital from his injuries. With adrenaline coursing through his veins, Chad made a desperate decision. He took McKay's vehicle and drove home, leaving behind the two bodies on the roadside. The silence of Dink Ashley Road returned, but it was now filled with unspeakable sorrow.
My son was here, and he just kept mumbling on about he had done something. So I asked him where was JR at, so he said it was up there on the side of the road. The dude had hit him and killed him.
Wood's father, Lawrence Claiborne, told news reporters that his son was out of it and was going off after seeing his son lifeless. "He just killed my son. He killed my son," Woods allegedly said to his dad. It wasn't long before law enforcement arrived at the scene, responding to McKay's 911 call. Officers found the bloody scene. 2 lives lost in minutes, their stories linked in tragedy. As the investigation unfolded, tracing the stolen vehicle back to Chad's home didn't take long.
Second-degree murder and felony larceny of a motor vehicle. While deputies searched the Woods home,
When officers arrived at the modest Timberlake residence, they found Chad sitting in stunned silence. The weight of his actions bore down on him, and he did not resist as he was taken into custody. Back at the Person County Detention Center, what had transpired began to sink in. He was charged with second-degree murder and larceny of a motor vehicle. His bond was set at $500,000.
And the search for the murder weapon used to shoot and kill McKay.
As investigators pieced together the events of that fateful morning, they searched a nearby pond for the firearm Chad had allegedly discarded. Despite exhaustive efforts, the weapon was not immediately recovered. The absence of the gun added another layer of complexity to the case. Still, the evidence against Chad was already substantial.
First, I've been to people struck by cars and I've been to shooting, but I haven't ever had this happen at the same time.
The case was described by Sergeant Keith Morris of the Person County Sheriff's Office as a sad situation all around for all the families, and noted as an unusual occurrence of having a pedestrian accident and shooting happen simultaneously.
I started listening a little bit closer and I thought, no, that is definitely a man's voice and it sounds like they're yelling for help. So probably about 2 minutes after that, I heard 2 gunshots, like back to back, just pow-pow, and then it armed.
This road has a lot of traffic on it all the time.
Patty Elliott lives on Dink Ashley Road. She's shocked at the 2 deaths right in front of her home.
I think the world is going crazy. I do. I mean, you can't go anywhere now. There ain't no shooting going on somewhere. So, yeah, it's kind of sad.
And police say when Woods was arrested, he told them he threw that handgun he'd used into the pond near the crash scene. They had to pause their search there today because of the heat, but they'll be back out at 7 tomorrow morning.
The community, still grappling with the shock of the tragedy, struggled to make sense of it all. Timberlake was a relatively quiet town, and the loss of 2 lives in such a violent manner was a wound that would take a long time to heal. Chad's first court appearance on August 16, 2023, was a scene steeped in solemnity and heavy emotion. Wearing an orange jumpsuit and shackles, he shuffled into the courtroom with his head slightly bowed, the weight of the preceding days reflecting on his face. His grief and remorse were noticeable, each step a testament to the burden he carried. Chad's eyes remained fixed on the ground as the judge addressed him. His body language spoke volumes of his internal turmoil. An attorney was appointed to represent him, a formality that seemed almost unreal given the emotional gravity of the situation. His next court date was scheduled for August 25th, which loomed like an ominous shadow in his future. The courtroom was filled to capacity, a stark reminder of how deeply this tragedy had shaken the small community. Among the crowd, some had come to support Chad, their faces marked with empathy and sorrow. Others were there seeking justice for Jeffrey McKay, their expressions hard with anger and grief. As of the time of this video, Chad Woods still remains in custody at the Person County Detention Center in North Carolina. the legal proceedings have been delayed due to ongoing investigations and pretrial motions. No trial date has been set. If convicted of second-degree murder, Chad faced the possibility of life imprisonment without parole. This reality hung over him like a storm cloud. Yet for Chad, no sentence could rival the pain of losing his son. The loss had carved a deep wound into his soul, a wound that no legal verdict could ever heal. As he was led out of the courtroom, his shoulders slumped under the weight of his anguish, leaving behind a room filled with whispers, tears, and a lingering sense of tragedy. Both families involved in the tragedy were left to grapple with unimaginable loss. For the Woods family, the death of a bright and promising young man was a wound that cut to the core. For the McKay family, the loss of Jeffrey, a man known for his dedication to his work and family, was equally devastating.
Close family and friends remember Chad Woods Jr., also known as JR, as a funny and driven 17-year-old.
The community of Timberlake rallied around both families, offering prayers, meals, and words of comfort. But beneath the surface, there were questions about how such a tragedy could have occurred, and whether it could have been prevented. The case sparked intense debate within the community. Some viewed Chad's actions as the impulsive reaction of a grief-stricken father. Others saw it as a senseless act of violence that took the life of an innocent man. As the legal process unfolded, these divisions only deepened. Chad's prior criminal record, though not detailed in official reports, became a point of contention. Some argued that it painted a picture of a man predisposed to violence. Others countered that his actions on that morning were not premeditated, but driven by the unbearable weight of grief. The search for closure for the families in the community remains ongoing. The legal proceedings will determine Chad's fate, but no verdict can undo the events of that August morning. For the families of both the victim and the accused, the path forward is fraught with pain and uncertainty. As Timberlake continues to heal, the memory of the lives lost on Dink Ashley Road serves as a sobering reminder of the fragility of life and the far-reaching impact of grief and loss. The Chad Woods case is a story without winners. It is a tale of heartbreak, human weakness, and decisions made in the heat of emotion that changed lives forever. As the legal process continues, the community holds its breath, hoping for justice, healing, and perhaps, in time, a measure of understanding. What do you think? Was this an impulsive act of grief, or was there more beneath the surface? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, if you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another case.